Okay, so now let's move on to the fourth part to our webinar, which is the deductible and non-deductible liabilities. So now this is going to the second step. So remember, the calculation process is first identifying zakat, and then identifying the zakatable asset. So that's already covered now. The second part or second step to calculate zakat is deductible and non-deductible liabilities. So this is personal liabilities, debt and credit committee. This is the committee that people put in. So that's what we're going to be covering now. It's called a kitty bank anyway. Now, first of all, when it comes to personal liabilities, these are the things to bear in mind. Okay, so when you have personal or business loans and liabilities, there are two types. There are short-term liabilities and long-term liabilities. Now, let me just give you a bit of an introduction to this. And I have a detailed fatwa on this, which is on the JKIN Fatwa website, about short-term loans and long-term loans and so on. I've put all that, I've included all the detailed discussion there. Now, first of all, this idea of short-term loans and long-term loans. So first understand what that means. Short-term loans, basically it means, short-term loans basically are those loans or those credit that are within, that you need to pay within 12 months, within a year. The reason why we stipulate 2 years is because zakat is paid every year, after every 12 months, right? So when we talk about short-term loans, we're talking about those loans which are paid within a year, before your next zakat due date. When we talk about long-term liabilities, long-term loans, we're referring to those type of loans that which you pay beyond 12 months. So for example, let's say you have like a mortgage, for example, of 20 years or 25 years, for example, or you have some kind of a business liability that where they ask you that you need to pay off your loan in the next 2, 3, 5 years, for example. Student loans, for example. Student loans are paid over a number of years, for example, okay? So those type of loans that which are paid over a period of number of years. That's how long-term loan liabilities are. Now, this discussion about long-term liabilities and short-term liabilities, you can say that this is more like a new ijtihad that many ulamas have, many scholars and ulamas have exercised in this year. Now, going back to the original slides that we went through when we talked about the prerequisites and the preconditions of zakat, you know, milkitam and hawaj asli and so on. One of them was farigun ad-dain, that you have to be debt-free. What you'll find that the general principle, as the fuqahas of the scholars mention, is that there's no zakat levied on debt. So when you're in debt, when you have money that you owe somebody, then there's no zakat on the debtor at all. So because the responsibility of the creditor, you don't need to pay that. Why? Is because that money doesn't belong to you. So the creditor, he's the one that's responsible for paying zakat on that. That was a general rule. However, fuqahas and scholars, that they made exception to certain cases that there may be certain exceptional instances that where despite the fact that you owe somebody money, and you're a debtor, you're the borrower, or you're in a position that you need to give somebody money, you still need to pay zakat on that, so long as that's in your possession. One of the extreme or exceptional case to that is that of mahar, that the scholars give. Now, and I talk about this in detail in the fatwa, but just to understand the summary of it, so you understand the rationale behind this, that they have something called mahr mu'ajjal. Now, there's two types of dowry that a man gives to his wife. One is that dowry which is demanded instantly. That's called mahr mu'ajjal, instant. And then you have mahr mu'ajjal, deferred payment. In other words, that there's a mutual agreement between the husband and wife as that you don't need to give me the mahr now, pay me after 2, 3 years. Now, the ulama scholars have mentioned, without going into the nitty-gritty detail, is that when it comes to mahr mu'ajjal, deferred payment of dowry, then the scholars say that, and the established opinion in the Hanafi madhab is that the husband needs to pay zakat on the mahar. So long as the mahar is in his hand, and he knows that he has to pay £1,000 to his wife, for example, as a mahar, but he's delaying it. He's delaying the payment. He's paying after 2, 3, 4 years, 5 years. He has the intention of paying it, but he's delaying it after 2, 3 years. So the question is now that, does he need to pay zakat on that £1,000 of mahar or deferred mahar? The scholars say that in this particular instance, he has to pay zakat on it. he has to pay zakat on that, okay? Even though that money doesn't technically belong to him, belongs to his wife, but is deferred, he has to pay zakat on that. So ulama, the scholars have used this case example to distinguish between short-term and long-term liability. Yes, which means is that any kind of debt that you need to pay within a year, or that which is demanded upfront, or somebody says to you that you need to pay me my debt right now, pay me debt now, otherwise there are going to be punitive measures, for example, then he has to pay, then the whole debt will now be deductible from his zakat. You know, he doesn't pay zakat on it at all. Yes, is that clear? Is within 12 months. Another case scenario is, and this is again a little bit nitty-gritty, but this is something to mention. If, for example, let's say that Zaid lent Bakr money, for example, let's say 3,000 pounds. Zaid lent Bakr money 3,000 pounds. Now Bakr said to Zaid that, look, you need to pay me. Zaid now sent to Zaid is a lender, Bakr is a borrower. So now Zaid says to Bakr that you need to pay me within 2 years. If you don't pay me 2 years, then there's going to be punitive measures. I'm going to penalize you, for example, right? That's the only exceptional case that the entire debt of 3,000 pounds is going to be deducted from his zakat. He doesn't need to pay zakat on a single penny on that 3,000 pounds. Rather, whatever's left over, he'll have to give zakat on that. That's only if it's on demand. Otherwise, there'll be punitive measures. Okay. Otherwise, with the exception of that, where all the debt is going to be deducted and there's no zakat on it. If it's a kind of debt that where there's no punitive measures, for example, or there's no instant demand whatsoever, then those debts which are long term, you have to pay zakat on that. You have to pay zakat on that. The only type of debt that you don't pay zakat on in this instance is those that which you need to pay within 12 months. So that's the simple rule. Is that clear? So I hope that's clear to everyone. If things you're not sure, then please mention in the chat box. So non-zakatable, deductible from the zakatable assets, and beyond 12 months, zakatable and cannot be deducted from the zakatable assets. So now, deductible and liability short terms. So let's go through step by step. What are those liabilities that are deductible which are short terms? For example, outstanding, not future, basic living expenses, utility bills, and so on. Number 2, goods purchased on credit. You have taken receipt of goods but not yet paid for them, and fully intend to pay the debt straight away. So, for example, you went to a shop, for example, purchased some groceries, and the shopkeeper is very kind enough to say, okay, to give you credit, give you credit, for instance, and you have the full intention of paying it instantly, straight away. Or the shopkeeper, he's demanding that you have to pay me, then that is deductible. That's a debt. You don't pay zakat on that at all. Then outstanding salaries, payable services, fee, tuition fee, etc. They're all deductible because they are usually paid on demand. Likewise, unpaid dowry to one's wife. Assuming one intends to pay this during the year, then it can too be deducted. It's only going to be deducted that if he's made the firm intention he's going to pay it within the year. But if it's only if it's instant mahar, but immediate mahar. If it's deferred mahar, like as I mentioned, that he's going to pay after 2, 3, 4 years, for example, then you will have to pay zakat on that. So I hope this is clear. So these are the ones which are going to be all deductible. Personal loans, that which needs to be repaid within a year, or mortgage on the capital only. I'll explain that in a short while, how do you calculate zakat on a mortgage. And then commercial loans. The entire loan cannot be deducted against assets, only 1 year's payment. So this is what I'm mentioning, commercial loans. We have all commercial loans, then short-term loans, which are 12 months, that will be deducted. The one after that will not be deducted. So how do you calculate zakat on mortgage? So this is the simplest way. Mortgage and long-term loans, right? Long-term loans. So this is all applies the same. So only 1 year of loan will be deducted and not the entire amount. So if somebody's got a loan or a mortgage 25 years, then you're not going to deduct the entire amount, because the rationale behind this is, that if you were to deduct all types of loans, even 20-25 years, then nobody will pay zakat then. Nobody will pay zakat. In fact, right, you can argue and say that, look, nobody's going to, any person will look for any excuses to say, look, because I'm in debt, I've got a mortgage and so on, therefore I don't need to pay zakat at all. So there'll be no one to pay zakat, then how the poor people are going to benefit from this? You understand? And you have to remember that, the debt in those years, in the classical times, it was not like how it is now, that where they'll have about 20, 30 years of contract or something like that. Okay. And by the way, when it comes to a mortgage, for example, or certain types of loans, you cannot even pay all lump sum altogether. Like, for example, the mortgage, right? They benefit from the interest. They benefit from the interest, don't they? Because they benefit from the interest, so they can penalize you potentially for you try to attempt to pay everything all at once, because the bank loses out because they benefit from the interest. However, over 20 years or 25 years, the more large sums that you pay, then the interest rate decreases, isn't it? For those who know mortgage, okay, right? So in this case, only 1 year of loan will be deducted. The entire amount will not be deducted. So let me give you an example. So for example, there's a person called Zaid. He has a loan of £100,000 of capital. I'll explain the reason why I mentioned capital. That's the actual amount. But let's say that's the value of the house over 20 years. So every year he is paying £5,000. So if you look at £100,000 over 20 years is £5,000 every year. So 5 times 20 is this or that, yes, 5,000. Then only 5,000 will be deducted for zakat and not the entire amount. So when he's calculating his zakat, because he got a long-term loan of 20 years, he's not going to deduct the entire £100,000 of his zakat, because otherwise you can argue that he's not going to pay anything at all. But rather what he will do, the amount that he's paying every year, which is £5,000, that will be deducted. And besides that, he'll pay zakat on the rest. So I hope that's clear to everyone. What about the interest itself? So the interest will not be deducted because that's not considered a valid loan. So if, for example, so in the above case, for example, if he calculates that if he's got a loan of £1,000, £100,000, but he's calculated that over the 20 years, he's actually paying an extra £50,000 interest. So it's 150 altogether. So he's paying. So that's why I mentioned the capital. Capital is actually 100,000, and the £50,000 interest, that will not be deducted. So he's not going to say, I'm going to deduct the entire £150,000 because I'm in debt, and neither is he going to deduct £50,000 altogether. Why? Is because that's not considered to be a valid it's not considered to be a valid loan, even to the extent that, going back to the example of £5,000. If, for example, let's say that he's paying £5,000 in a year, then that's fine. It's okay. That can be deducted anyway. Even though that's within the interest or not, then there's probably exception in that, is because that's by the year, that's already gone anyway. Yes. But that's already gone. But otherwise, the interest itself in a long term will not be deducted, and neither the long term of beyond £5,000 in a year, that will not be deducted. So I hope that's clear to everyone. Now, how to calculate zakat on committee savings? Now, I have a diagram here, and I have a diagram here, and we'll discuss it there, inshallah. First of all, what is a committee? So before I ask, can hands up those who have a committee? Hands up those who have a committee. Okay, this is something that which is very popular amongst the South Asian community, and it's kind of like it's a support that family members or people who are part of a committee, they support one another in terms of so it's an easy way of saving. That's the bottom line to it. So just to explain, I've written a whole detailed fatwa on this, by the way. I have a whole detailed article on the JK Fatwa website on how to calculate zakat on a committee. This is just a summary of this. It's a scheme where members support one another to receive a large sum of money in a short period, which can take up to a month or years to save. So let's say you want to save 100,000, you want to save, let's say, £2,000, okay, right? £2,000 in 2 years, for example. Yes. So you have to set aside certain money into your safe or into your personal saving, for example, right? So what this does is that whatever amount it takes you, however many months it takes you to save £2,000, you can get that money. You can get that money in a short period of time. However, because it's certain members, it's a group of members who have joined to support one another in this scheme. So it's a kind of lending and borrowing scheme. It falls into a lending and borrowing scheme. I'll explain that shortly. Many join this scheme either for personal savings or to fulfill large financial costs, such as paying off large sums of debt, paying off a deposit of a mortgage, cash their house or other essentials. So people sometimes use halal. So some certain committees, what they do, they have 1 year's committee, some have 2 years committee, some have 5 years committee, some have 10 years committee. It just depends. And it just depends on the number of people. So the way the scheme works is that you have members comprising of family, relatives, acquaintances who mutually contribute monthly or weekly into a pot. So it depends. Let's say, for example, you have about 12 people, for instance, 12 people. Each one of them, they contribute £100 to in a pot. The number of participants vary depending on the agreed duration and the amount received. So depending upon that, how much you contribute, it all depends on how many people there are. If there's sufficient people, 12 people, then it could be one year. If there's more than that, it could be 24 people, it could be 2 years, and so on. Each one contribute. It also depends on how much each wants to contribute: £100, £200, £150, £300, etc. So the number of participants vary depending on the agreed duration and the amount received. The trustee takes responsibility. So you have one trustee who takes full responsibility of safekeeping of all of the weekly or monthly contributions into a pot. And what the trustee does, they draw out a list. A list of names of all of the members for each week or month or whoever's turn it is to receive their large sum. Yes. So for example, there's about 12 people. So the 24 people, for example, in 2 years. So the trustee will draw a list of all the names and they'll mention, okay, you're going to receive yours in this month, you will receive yours in this month, you'll receive yours in this month. However much you're contributing was the total amount, you receive all that amount. Once you receive yours, you have to continuously contribute so to reimburse everybody else's. So by the time the committee duration or the contract finishes, you've received money and you've paid everybody out. So the trustee then draws a list of names of the members for each week or month, and whosoever turn it is, they receive a large sum. And one of the advantages of this is that it's an easy way of saving, and it just gives mutual support. It just offers support to one another. Okay, this is the simplest way to understand how a committee works. Okay, so now how do you calculate zakat on a committee? How does it work? So let's take an example here. So for instance, this is 12 months. So I hope everybody can see this anyway. Oh, it's not clear. Okay, do you want me to zoom in? How's that? Is that okay? Yep, perfect. Okay, mashallah. Take it. Right. So let's take this. So just give me a second. I'm just trying to do the setting here. Okay, that's fine. Okay. How do you calculate zakat on committee? Now, this is a typical scenario. Let's say these are 2 years, 2020, 2023 and 2024. This is the 12th month of the year, January to December, and then you got January to December. This year is 2023, and this is the year 2024. You have now joined a committee of 2 years, and you are contributing £100 a month. £100 a month for 2 years. What is the total? 2,400, for example. So the committee starts here, and it ends in December 2024. You're contributing £100 a month, and the end committee is 2,400 people, £2,400. Now, what you're doing is that you are paying £100 every month, £100 every month, and the trustee has now drawn the list that who is going to now receive their committee. You have now, your list comes, or your name appears in December. So you're contributing all the way till December, and now your turn comes of committee that you're going to receive £2,400 in December. Yes. Once you've received it, it doesn't mean that you could just walk away. You have to continue contributing up until the following year of December 2024. I hope that's clear to everyone. Now, this yellow mark here, this yellow mark is your zakat due date. I've not put any Islamic month, Ramadan or whatever. It varies for every individual. But let's just say, for example, right, this is your zakat due date. So this is like on the 7th month. Yes. So this is where you need to pay your zakat. Now, the first rule to remember is that before you calculate that whether you're going how you're going to pay zakat, you need to look at your own condition first. Are you the lender or are you the borrower? Are you the lender or are you the borrower? Zaid, for example, he's contributing all the way and he's now receiving his he received committee on December. So which means this whole time he's giving money and he's lending. He's giving money and he's lending. He's not taking any money yet. Once he's taken the money committee of 2,400, the contribution that he's making now from January all the way till the end, he's now become the borrower. Now the £100 that he's contributing, that £100 now is the additional £1,200 that he's borrowed from the members. He's paying that back now, so to reimburse all the members. I hope that's clear. So you need to first understand, what state are you in? Are you the one that's lending or are you the one that's borrowing? This is determined by when you receive your committee. As simple as that. That's number one. Now, let's say, for example, this is my zakat is now. So I'll just give my own example, okay? So this is where my zakat is now. And I'm contributing £100 every month. So 100, 200, 300, 400, so all the way to 700. So now I've got £700 altogether and I'm contributing, yes? I'm lending. Now remember, when I'm lending, other people are taking my money. Other people are borrowing out, so I'm the lender. In this case, because I'm the creditor now, I need to pay zakat on the £700. So from January until my zakat date, I've so far paid £700. So I need to pay zakat on the £700 this year, now on this month. Hope that's clear. Yes. What's left now? I've got £500 left up until December, isn't it? Up until December. So again, I'm still contributing. In December, I received £1,200. Now, from January 2024 onwards, now the £100 that I am contributing, now that is a debt because I'm reimbursing other people. What do you do about zakat now? This is where you apply the long term and the short term. Again, what was long term? Long term debt is that which is beyond 12 months. Short term is within 12 months, isn't it? Now, from this year to this year is 12 months, isn't it? From, let's say that's July, okay? So it's August all the way till this July, that's 12 months, yes? So now, how much you need to deduct of your zakat, for your zakat, how much you need to deduct for zakat and how much you need to pay zakat? It's a simple. If we go by the long-term and the short-term rule, then this £700 that I am contributing from January up until my zakat due date, this £700 will not be zakatable now. Yes, this will no longer be zakatable. Okay, why? Is because I'm paying. However, this £500 that I am paying, that I have left to pay, I'm not going to deduct that. I'm still going to pay zakat on this. So in short, how much zakat am I going to pay? This £500 for this one here, okay? We're not talking about this. This is the previous one. That's already done. This £500 and this £500 long-term debt, you'll have to pay zakat on that, which means you need to pay zakat of £1,000. So from your committee, you've already paid £700 for this. You don't need to pay, this is deductible because that's your debt. This £500 that's remaining and this £500 that you've contributed, you need to pay zakat on that. That's £1,000 because that's considered your long-term debt. And the reason why this is because £500, because you're the lender. So in this case, you're the lender. Here is now you're the borrower, but it's because it's beyond, because it goes beyond the 12-month mark, you have to pay zakat on that. Is that clear to everybody so far? Is that understood? So that was the a basic illustration of zakat. Now, just to mention here though, a golden rule: you give zakat when lending and saving and long-term debt, not on the short-term debt. So the example that I gave, in this case, there was a short-term debt of 2024 from January till your next zakat. Because that's a short-term debt, right? I think that was about £700, I think it was. That's going to be deducted. So not in the short-term debt, but you give zakat when lending and saving, or in a long-term debt. So we talked about that. Now, I just want to mention something here though. There's not much fatwas on this. I have, alhamdulillah, written a detailed fatwa on this, but there have been one or two fatwas that I've come across about zakat and committee. Now, some scholars are giving a fatwa, and you'll find some fatwas on this. Some scholars are giving a fatwa that, you know, all the credit, all the money that you lend, that's all deductible altogether. That's all deductible altogether. Some scholars are on that opinion, that when it comes to committee, how much you are contributing, so long as your committee is not coming yet, you are still considered to be the lender. You pay zakat on that, okay? But once you have collected your committee, and now the contribution that you're making now is to reimburse everybody else, all of that will be deducted. So for example, in the case example that I gave, that when his committee comes in December 2023, then the following year, the entire £1,200 for the following year, because he's paying, all that is deductible. All that is deductible. So you only need to pay zakat on the £500 of the first year. That's what that fatwa is, right? But again, my personal stance and position is that no, you will have to apply the long term and the short term. So the way I've illustrated, I'm saying this is because you may come across some fatwas that say that zakat is deductible altogether. They're going by the principle of debt, that all debt are deducted by default. But if we go by the short term and the long term principle, then this is how it's calculated, and this is my own personal position. So before we move on, I think somebody's got a question. Yes. Yes? Okay, good. Okay, alhamdulillah. So long as you've understood, that's fine. Now there's a case study now. So I'm going to put your knowledge to a test, okay? Zaid has a committee of 2 years of £4,800, saving £200 each month. The committee starts in January 2023 and ends in December 2024. Same example. Both years, zakat due date is in May, month of Shawwal, and he takes his committee of 4,800 in February 2024. How would he calculate his zakat for May 2024? That's the question. Okay, so alhamdulillah, so we've gone through that case study. So basically, as I mentioned in the diagram, is that he'll only deduct from the February 2024 up until May, which is Shawwal, those 3 months, March, April, May, he will deduct them as the short terms, and after May, all the other contributions that he's making up until December 2024, because the fact that that's considered to be long-term debt, he will have to he could not deduct that from his zakat. That will be included in his zakat. So from 4,800, the committee that he receives in February, he'd only deduct £600 for his contribution to until May and including May. And after that, he won't deduct, he will continue paying zakat. So I hope that was clear. That's the fatwa that I follow anyway. Now this is receivable debt. Now receivable debt basically the creditor, which means that you've lent somebody money. You've lent somebody money or somebody owes you money. Okay, so what's the ruling regarding that? How do you calculate? So there's 3 types. One is qawi, one is mutawassit, and one is da'if. Qawi basically means strong debt, a loan due to trading in commercial goods or reselling or loan money. So basically, this is like an example of, let's say, a wholesaler and a retailer. Yes, a wholesaler, he sells some stock to a retailer, and the retailer tells him that I will pay you in a few months' time, for example. Okay, I'll pay you after 2-3 months. Yes, so the wholesaler, to whom money is owed for trade, this falls under qawi debt. Okay, or receivable zakat debt. So the item received will be zakatable should it remain with the purchaser. So even if it remains with the purchaser, in this case it retains with the retailer, then the wholesaler, he still needs to pay a zakat on that. Zakat becomes payable on the previous years or 20% of the total amount received. So once you receive 20%, then he will have to pay zakat on that if he's paying installments, or if there's an agreement that he's going to pay the whole amount. So if there's agreement that he's going to pay, the whole amount, then after however many years it may be, then you have to pay zakat on those previous years. This is the creditor now. Then you have the medial and mutawassit, a loan due to part exchange of personal goods such as household furniture, basic living essentials or services provided. What this means what this basically means is that the person, this is the case of, for example, like a retailer selling something to the customer. A retailer selling items to the customer for their own personal use. But the customer now owes you money. The customer now owes you money. So the money that the customer owes you, that kind of credit that's owed to you, that will fall under medial debt. So the zakat becomes payable on the creditor upon receiving the full amount and not on the previous year. So the fatwa is that you'll only pay zakat not on the previous years, but only upon receiving the zakat. So even if the customer says to you that I'll pay you after a number of years, 2-3 years, for example, then upon receiving the full amount, then you pay zakat on that year only, not on the previous years. And a weak loan, and there's no part exchange of one zakat wal asset with the other, because there's no part exchange like one zakat asset to another. But this is because due to the reason why is because whilst you're selling with the zakat, somebody is purchasing it for their own personal use, isn't it? So you're receiving money, but then what you're giving is for their personal use. That's not zakatable. In the previous one, it's an exchange of zakatable to zakatable. So a wholesaler, when he's selling something to the retailer is receiving so he can sell. So the items that he receives, he's going to sell, that's zakatable. And what the wholesaler is giving, that's also, or what the wholesaler is receiving, that's also zakatable. So there's part exchange of zakatable asset with another zakatable asset. Median, on the other hand, the retailer is receiving the money and he has to pay zakat on the market value. And by the way, how do you calculate? It's usually the market value. So on trading stocks, I think I mentioned this, that it's all on the based on the market value. So so the retailer is going to calculate the stock of zakat on the market value, but the customer, because they're receiving the item for their own personal use, so there's no part exchange zakatable asset. That's why. So on that basis, the retailer, he will only pay zakat on the until receiving the full amount. And a weak loan without exchange or tangible goods such as dowry, inheritance, will, khula, etc., zakat becomes payable on the creditor upon receiving the full amount and not on the previous years. Received items are not part exchange with anything at all. There's no part exchange. Like a gift, for example, mahar, for example, dowry, inheritance, so on and so forth. This is something we already covered anyway previously, that you only need to pay zakat upon receiving the money. They don't need to pay zakat on the previous years, only that year where the zakat is due. So I hope this is clear. Now, the question is now the debtor. The debtor basically is someone who is the debtor. The debtor basically is the borrower, you can say, the borrower. So when Zaid has, for example, lent money to Bakr, for example, now Zaid being the creditor will only be applicable that he pays zakat if there is some kind of assurance that Bakr, who's the borrower, he's going to pay the money back. Yes, he acknowledges that. So there are two conditions for the creditor, the one who's lending money, that zakat to be compulsory upon him. Number one is that acknowledges the debt. The borrower acknowledges the debt. Zakat is levied on the debt by the creditor because the creditor is the one who's paying the zakat, isn't it? Or denies the debt, or he either denies the debt. The creditor is absolved from his responsibility. So, sorry, put it another way. If he acknowledges the debt and he's promised to pay the lender, then zakat becomes compulsory upon the lender of the previous years. If, however, Bakr, he denies the debt, for example, or he runs away, for example, or there's no way of Zaid now receiving his money, now the creditor is absolved from his responsibility. He doesn't need to pay zakat at all now. The only time that where he not to pay zakat upon if somehow miraculously he receives the money. But he receives the money without him expecting to receive the money. He'll only need to pay zakat on that year. He doesn't need to pay zakat on the previous years. So this to remember, the zakat creditor will only pay zakat on the previous years that if he knows that he's going to receive his money back. If, for example, there's no way he's going to receive money back whatsoever, for example, the borrower has declared bankruptcy and the banks have declared him as bankruptcy, so he doesn't need to owe anybody now. So nobody can demand anything from him. Now, in that case, the previous years of zakat, the money is now dropped. So this is a case study now. So I want you to work this out. So Zaid lent Bakr £5,000 and promised to pay him after 3 years. After a few months, Bakr ran away, and after much effort, Zaid has lost all hope in receiving his money back. 5 years later, Bakr suddenly appears and gives him his £5,000 back. Must Zaid now pay zakat on the previous 5 years or only on the year he receives his money back? What do you think? Let me know in the comments. Yes, so the answer is that Zaid only needs to pay only on the year that he received the money, because he lost all hope. And when he lost hope, he no longer has milkiyat over that money. Now, because his milkiyat is now completely lost, and there's no zakat and milkiyat, so that all those years of 5 years, the zakat is now he's absolved. So once he receives it that year, then zakat will be payable only for that year, inshallah. Okay, good. So this is some general advice I would give. The general advice I would give to people is that, look, as a final note, that note the date when you become Sahib in Nisab for the first time. So a general advice when it comes to calculating zakat, and this is kind of like a summary of this, note the date when you become Sahib in Nisab for the first time, and the fluctuation of the month throughout the year does not affect your zakat anniversary. So even though the money fluctuates throughout the whole year, that doesn't affect your zakat anniversary, unless if you reduce to zero. If your balance is reduced to zero, now your initial annual zakat anniversary, that becomes cancelled automatically now. So the next time you become Sahib Nisab, that's your new anniversary starts. Yes. So if the fluctuation is, regardless if it's below the Nisab or above the Nisab, but so long as you got some money there, then your zakat anniversary date still remains the same. Okay. But if you go to zero balance, then your initial zakat anniversary date is now cancelled. The next time you become Sahib Nisab, that's when your new zakat anniversary year starts. Your zakat anniversary is determined by the lunar calendar. You then deduct 2.5% payable as your zakat. This process continues until the wealth falls below the nisab level or have lost all of your wealth, as I mentioned. If you haven't paid your zakat that year, then that remains outstanding. So if you haven't paid your zakat, that remains outstanding. Then you have to pay as soon as possible.